Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Welcome everybody to Manager Monday, using distance learning to increase MSGs. Our presenters today are Lori Slayton of TWC, Dr. Deborah Hargrove of TCOL, and Dr. Kurt Supreme from College of the Mainland.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lori Slayton with the Texas Workforce Commission. Joining me today is Dr. Deborah Hargrove, the Managing Director of TCOL, and Dr. Kurt Supreme with College of the Mainland. Welcome to Manager Monday. Today we're going to look at the correlations between measurable skills gains and the incorporation of distance learning into student programming. The days of brick and mortar schooling being the only option are now long gone, we know that. But we found that perhaps today's integrated method of learning may be much better for student success. For those of you struggling with distance learning, I think we might be able to help you out today. We're going to look at some data, some really good ideas, and some awesome resources. So technically speaking, distance learning is defined as learning when the instructor and the student are separated by time, geography, or both. For the purposes of today's discussion, distance learning refers to the use of one of the state's approved distance learning curricula that allows for the accumulation of proxy hours. TCOL maintains the state's approved distance learning curricula list, which you can find from the link at the top of the page. As of today, there are 36 approved vendors on the list with a total of 78 independent curricula to choose from, and I counted those myself. Today, we're going to show you how incorporating the use of these curricula substantially increases opportunities for students to make a gain and advance in their education and in the workforce. At the same time, distance learning enables students to acquire digital literacy, digital readiness, and online learning skills. If you're a program that really hasn't participated much in distance learning, please know that Module 1 of the Distance Learning Academy is required for key administrative staff, teachers, and support staff who are engaged in distance learning, including any instructor assigned to a class that reports proxy hours in teams. Module 1 is an introductory course that explains the state guidance for distance learning in Texas and how distance learning is tracked, documented, and entered into teams. This module must be completed prior to engaging in distance learning. And this information is straight out of the AEL distance learning policy, which can be found in the second link at the top of the page. If you don't know anything about the DL Academy, please reach out to your TCOL PD specialist, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help you out. In fact, Distance Learning Academy Module 1 has recently been updated by Ashley and Michelle at the Distance Education PD Center and is now being offered as both a face-to-face or online training. It was piloted this last weekend at College of the Mainland, and we're going to hear from Kurt in just a few minutes about what's going on over there. So each program has a distance learning plan. They're required to keep and update as needed. If you'd like to see a copy of your program's DL plan, you can reach out to your DL lead or your program director. Let's take a look at why. Why do we want to do something that's different from what we've been doing and would possibly mean a little more of an investment on my part if I'm an instructor. Two really good reasons are on this slide. Now, you know, I work for the Texas Workforce Commission, so I'm never going to tell you that your state targets aren't important. But more important than your state targets is that by incorporating distance learning into your current programming, you substantially increase opportunity for students to make a skill level gain in their education and an opportunity to progress where they may have been stagnant. You all know best how exciting it is to a student when they see that progress reflected in their learning and make that gain. A natural byproduct of increasing those opportunities for students is that you as a program also progress towards meeting those MSG targets negotiated with TWC each year. Programs that are either fully face-to-face or fully online often face a pivotal struggle in meeting every student's unique needs, but integrated learning models help provide avenues for all students to succeed. Our focus is on students and how this blended learning model can improve students' learning and teachers' instruction in the classroom. Both AEL students and instructors can achieve their educational goals and objectives through this learning model. There's a study from the U.S. Department of Education that reports consistent findings that while students in online-only courses perform modestly better than those in face-to-face courses, students in blended learning programs ultimately outperformed all the others. So we're going to look at what's behind these findings. Some of the research we looked at suggests that presenting information in multiple formats increases knowledge retention. Other research pointed toward the fact that when technology is integrated into learning models, students are more likely to remain interested and focused. In any case, it's evident that this particular dynamic learning model has its advantages, and that's what we're going to talk about now. What you're looking at is the distance learning report from teams called Participants Enrolled and Level Completed with Proxy Hours, which is far too complicated a title. So we call it the None, Some, and Mostly report. We call it that because the first three sets of columns, B, C, and D, are data related to students without any proxy hours. They don't do any distance learning. The second three columns, E, F, and G, relate to students with traditional education and some proxy hours. And the last three, H, I, and J, are what are called distance learning students, meaning that more than 50% of their education is distance learning. I know this is a lot to look at and absorb, so I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes while we talk through it. Column A is the educational functioning level of students at the beginning of the year. You can see at the very top, the grouping of columns is designated without proxy hours, less than or equal to 50% proxy hours, and the third is greater than 50% of the proxy hours. At the bottom of column B, you can see that total of 33,000 plus students that had no proxy hours at all. Then skip over 2 columns to the bottom of column D, and you can see that their rate of skill level gain is 22%. That's for participants with 0 proxy hours. We're looking at the total line, second from the bottom, columns B, C, and D. The next 3 columns, E, F, and G, again, the bottom total row, you can see that students who have traditional instruction but are also accumulating proxy hours, column G shows us their rate of gain jumps all the way up to 36% from the 22% we see for students that do not engage in distance learning. Columns H, I, and J are those students whose instruction is greater than 50% distance learning, and their rate of skill gain drops a bit to 32%, registering a skill level gain, but it's still a full 10% higher than students who do not engage in distance learning at all. As I said, this report shows a lot of information. and breaks it down by educational functioning level, how students are doing with their MSGs. If you don't currently use this as a planning document, I really encourage you to pull it up and look at your programs data. You can get to it in Teams by going up to reports on your homepage, then distance learning, then participants enrolled and level completed with proxy hours. Before we go to the next slide, from our total number of students, what percentage of folks do you think engage in distance learning statewide? The percentage of folks we have participating in distance learning is 41.7%. At the bottom right-hand corner of program 21-22 column, which is awesome. We are leaders in the nation, I can tell you, with that high of a percentage. And I do a report every year for the ADUL Consortium, which is the impact of distance education in adult learning. ADUL Consortium. I do a report every year on our progress with distance learning, and that's where this slide comes from. You can see all the way back to 18-19, we were as low as 20.7%, but with just a lot of effort from the field and some investments by TWC in distance learning, we elevated more than 9 percentage points in 19-20. And then what happened, right? The pandemic. As sad as the pandemic continues to be, it shot our percentage points up all the way to 38% at the end of 2021. And in 21-22, we built on the momentum and established that 41.7% of our total students participated in distance learning. The ADUL Consortium that I mentioned currently has 17 states participating. We do a lot of best practice sharing, policy sharing, things of that nature for distance education and the integration of technology.
Now that you guys have seen the results of what happens to MSG attainment when you incorporate distance learning, let's talk a little bit about how to make that work in your program. Distance learning for adult education has come a very long way, and there hasn't been a lot of research on the effectiveness, but it's starting to get better. And some early research on distance learning by the ADUL Consortium and some other partners talked about the importance of finding that right student to participate in distance learning and setting them up correctly for the programs to succeed in offering distance learning. Today, when so many programs really lean heavily on remote options, a more equitable approach would be whether your program offers the right fit to meet the needs of students who show up. In my opinion, not all students are ready for distance learning. Effective recruitment reaches people at the right time and place, and setting a strategy before you begin is essential. The first step is believing in the data that Lori just shared, the None, Some, and Mostly report. It works. Blended learning works. We have data to back that up. Teaching students in a classroom and then also adding the opportunity for them to continue learning by accessing distance learning works. You saw it. In Texas, our largest population in adult education and literacy is ESL. And if you take a look again at that report, or see if you can pull it up for your program, you'll see that they're progressing more than the other groups in this type of learning environment. So whether you're teaching in a blended or hybrid or strictly just a distance format, successful students are likely to be self-motivated, able to work independently, possess strong study and organizational skills, those that have emerging academic skills, those who need more support, or those who are English language learners may fare better in a blended program that combines distance ed with ample face-to-face interaction. It's been hard to advance ESL students because of that sense of community. They don't want to leave, so they don't want to test to know that they've gained that measurable skill gain. They've gained that EFL. They want to stay. But what we've seen is if we share with them the importance of distance learning and how it can help them attain their goals, they're more likely to be successful. Many programs here in Texas only enroll students that have the necessary digital skills. Others that you'll see have enrolled their entire student population. If you want to enroll all of your students, and that's fine, in distance learning, I recommend having the supports in place to assist those who don't have the necessary digital literacy skills or time management to complete their work. We don't want to set them up for failure. Those and other tools help with motivation and time management and allows you to work with them. Inevitably, you need to get the student to buy into the concept of succeeding, that they can do it with distance learning. Having a backup plan in place will keep that student engaged. Think about what type of learner they are. Are they struggling with digital literacy skills? Are they struggling with being able to manage their independent time, their time away when they're at home or they're out in the library or they're out in a field having a picnic and just taking a break, getting on their laptop? Now, Dr. Kurt Zaprine of College of the Mainland is one of those sensational folks who have enrolled all of their students, and they are doing a phenomenal job.
First of all, I'd like to say that I know every program is different and one size doesn't fit all. And lots of things that we discovered, it was through trial and error. Our director has always pushed innovation, and if in doubt, try it, and we'll sort it out afterwards. He's always encouraging us to do different things, try different things, and stay with what works. So this is just a graphic of what our measurable results have been in terms of reportable data. Our DL participants, before we started, we actually were using Aztec back in 2014 and had 207 students that achieved at least 7.5 minutes or more. The next year, when we really began developing some organization and training, we went up to 401. And then the following year, almost doubled again to 737, and then began to level off a little bit. We probably had our biggest year was at 2018-19, and we were on track in 2019-20 to do better than that. But when COVID came along, so many things were stopped for us. So we stopped new enrollment in the middle of spring. We enroll every 8 weeks. And so the following year, we had actually lower numbers a year ago, 551. And then last year, bounced back up again to 834, and we'll probably go over 1,000 probably this year. We enroll everyone. If you enroll in an ESL class or HSE class or any of the other classes that we have, you are automatically enrolled in either Burlington English and Aztec, and you receive an orientation, and that's a part of the homework for that class. Our total proxy hours started out, of course, low and has pretty much gained steadily. The final year, which is this past year, we took another jump from 220 to 221 to 221-22 of almost about 9,000 students. We'll probably do some leveling off there with that, although some of that's dependent upon the number of participants that you have as well. Table 4 is your total program participants as one of the reports that we run frequently. As you can see, what stands out to me is our DL participants have continued to do well, and our proxy hours aren't necessarily related to the total number of students that we have enrolled. Last year, we had 970 students enrolled and managed to accumulate over 20,000 hours. And that rolls out into the percent participation below, which we're proud of that, in that we started out at 16%, became up to 26%, and then the first full year, 50%. And then we kind of got stuck in there a little bit. There's some things that happened through the pandemic that I'll make mention of that we stopped doing, and some other things that we started doing that I think had an impact on that, because about that time, we were a part of the Distance Learning Capacity Building Initiative grant. It was doubtful if we were ever going to meet our 80%. And I was discussing with our director, I said, I just don't know that we'll be able to go any further than about 65, 70%, despite what we do. And that turned out to be not true. It was easy to pick up those students that remained and stayed with us through the remote learning days of the pandemic. So we bounced up to 72%. But then last year, then 81% the first full year of remote learning. And then last year, when we were predominantly face-to-face classes again, we went up to 86%. We look at that as a real positive, such that everyone has access to it and has had some instruction with it, and that it's a part of their class that they take with us. These are just some of our design components. right now, and not necessarily last year or the year before that, but kind of where we are right now. All our students are enrolled, whether they're virtual or face-to-face in Aztec or Burlington English, and some request both. Teachers or DL staff conduct orientations for DL software, D2L, which we now use in place of Blackboard, the Office 365 package, which includes Microsoft Teams, and the COM network itself. Pre-pandemic, all of the orientations were done by DL staff. Through the pandemic and post-pandemic, most of the orientations are conducted by the teachers themselves. So that in and of itself, I think, created a big change in terms of students get it much earlier than they would otherwise, and the teachers involved with it rather than they allow guest speakers to come in and talk about something new that may or may not be integrated into their daily classroom activities. And also having those teachers involved, they can deal with lots of the small, how do I do this questions, or I got stuck questions as well. So that turned out to be a very good thing. And actually was one of our goals along the way. We were just struggling with getting teachers to develop the skill level and the comfort level to be able to do that. All teachers are required to have a minimum of 3 hours training prior to assignment. That's going up to 6 hours in January. It's just not enough time for them to feel comfortable with all the things that we're asking them to do. We have a couple of different sessions. And the first one, we go over all their digital resources that they have, beginning with the COM network, because it always amazes me when I talk with my colleagues around the state, and I think I'm the only one that deals with so many login problems. And then everyone's saying, yeah, that's the number one problem that we have too, is logging into the COM network, having confusion of their passwords between Burlington English and COM and Aztec and GED.com, et cetera. In fact, one of the things we used to do several years ago was DL used to give students, usually their second week of class, sometimes a third, a piece of paper with their names and their COM login and their initial password and their Aztec login and password, and if they're in Burlington, whatever. And we stopped doing that through the pandemic because teachers were doing that. They're taking them straight from the Aztec and Burlington websites. Now teachers have said, we need those sheets back because it helps students organize what password and username is to what, and then they can take a photo of that, or they can put that into one of their savings apps that they may or may not use. Optional training is encouraged and compensated. So if a teacher wants to go to a conference or engage in some of the Aztec or Burlington trainings, they are actually compensated for that. That was a new thing for us. A few years ago, more and more teachers said, well, I'm really not compensated for all these hours I spent. And we changed that such that with the permission of their coordinator, they can engage in the training and they can be compensated for that. DL is integrated in the curriculum of all classes. I think that's been a big thing for us in that it's something that they think about every day. The teachers can talk about it every day, can show students where to go to get help, certainly where to go to work on some worksheets or some drills, as Aztec has. Having it integrated into every class every day gets teachers and students to think about it. We encourage students to spend 4 hours a week outside of class, and their homework is all assigned in DL. They don't get paper worksheets to take home or books. All their homework is assigned in DL. And I think this was also substantial as well. They get comfortable working on it that way, and they start that pretty much from the very beginning. 2 hours are minimum. And we tell teachers that if students don't do anything except come to class, we stress how long that's going to take them to achieve their goal. And that if students don't average at least 2 hours a week, they can be dropped for lack of participation. It's not common. All instructional content is digital only. We haven't purchased any new books since I actually started work here in 2016. So everything is available digitally. That also gets both teachers and students comfortable with the fact if I need to learn this, or I need to find out this, or I need to ask this question, or how do I do this? Is they look for digital resources first rather than looking it up in a book. It's transferable into doing their work with both Burlington English and Aztec. Last year, we started requiring teachers to run and submit a weekly proxy report to their coordinators. Too frequently, we would end up with 6 weeks into an 8-week class, we have students that had never logged in before. And we'd ask the teachers, how come? And they didn't know. They didn't know that they hadn't logged in, or I didn't know that they've been not doing their homework. And so this, I think, keeps them accountable, but also it allows the teachers to see who's doing what. And wow, this student has done 20 hours of work this week. I need to go in and look at that and make sure that they're on track and that we're making the best use of their time. DL assistance can be requested anytime. I ask them to text me with their name and their teacher's name and their problem. And I tell them if they do it at 2 a.m, that is just fine. They're mad and they want to let somebody know about it or frustrated. But I will respond to them usually when I get up around 6-ish. And that way we can get back with them relatively quickly. Many times they're not texting me at 2 a.m. They're texting me at 8:30 or 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock or at break when their class meets. And so we can deal with their issues quickly and efficiently. I think we should work to solve as many problems in real time as we possibly can. And I want to stress with the students, I said, no, don't give up. Don't give up. We can fix this. I said, we just need to get some things sorted out here. We'll get this fixed. And we do it with as less hassle, travel, and time as possible. So if I can fix it remotely and send them a text saying, okay, you should be fine now, go ahead and try to log in, or we can do it over the phone, or we can do a Microsoft Teams meeting, or they can come into the office and we'll meet with them and help them there. The final thing is that effort equals results. And it's teachers, it's me and the DL staff and students as well, is you got to put effort into it if you're going to see the results. And the harder you work at it, the more you work at it, the more progress that you're going to make. So just because we have wonderful digital resources that frees us up from some of the inconveniences that we have without having to always drive for things, we still have to do the work. Teachers are really the key. And I think we learned that during the pandemic, is that the factor in what students do or don't do and how excited they are and the first stop for solving their problems. So their training is essential.
How would you modify your program design for a smaller program?
We started out very small. So you look at doing what you can do and working from there with what works, what doesn't work so well, what you can be replacing it with, what comments do you get from your teachers, trying to support them the best you can. I did not have a staff at all. It was just myself. When we first started, I was the one that had to go from class to class to class and do the orientations and do the teacher trainings and so on. So you kind of have to start at the beginning with what do I have in terms of staffing? What do we have in terms of what are my teachers like, and get started with that. Then as the work demands it and your numbers start demanding it, you can move into some more interesting things that involve more different people. But if it's just you have to look and see, let's set some goals for ourselves of what we'd like to be able to accomplish in our first year and what they're currently doing in class and what you have the budget for. We were fortunate. When I first started here, we just begun DL Mentor 1 grant. And so we had some grant money to do some things. And so that was very helpful. We purchased our first Burlington English seats that year with DL1 money. And also we first tried tablets as opposed to the laptop computers we have now. That did not work out very well, but we used grant money for that as well. So it helps if you have some additional funding, at least for a temporary period, to try some things. Something else that I think is a factor here is that teachers were at first reluctant to go in and spend time with either Aztec or Burlington English. As it turned out, the more comfortable they become going in as a student, doing the work during the units, taking the pre-tests, taking the post-tests. And with Burlington English, there's so many different things to see and do and to look at their progress and such. It makes them much more effective and much more credible with their students if they've done that. We started paying teachers for up to 10 hours of working in either Burlington, Aztec, or both. That's not been a silver bullet for us. I mean, it's not, you would think teachers would say, oh, that's wonderful, I'd love to do that. And that makes a lot of sense for me and I can't wait, but that's still not the solution you would think it is, but we do have teachers that do it, and those that do, I think, benefit greatly as a result of that. I also give a pre-session teacher workday before every 8-week sessions on Saturday mornings. They can come in, and I have the entire staff in there, and we help them with everything from customizing their Blackboard class, now D2L, to setting up expectations for their students with Burlington English or Aztec so that they're ready to go with getting students started on that very first week. They work off a checklist for technology. They're supposed to do that their first week, everything from logging in to going through an orientation. Next, I encourage them to ask for assistance from me or staff for orientations or any advanced use or questions. We're always available to attend their class or to come in on a Teams visit or to work with the teacher individually. And I try to always be very non-judgmental and helpful and try to find out where they are and move them forward from that. I'm a coordinator, but I ask them, right? My goal is for them to see me as a consultant, someone who's there to help them, regardless of what their needs are, to help them move forward. I want them to be very comfortable with asking me, with calling me and letting me know that they got a problem and what it is. And so we can assist them in working with that. Next, teacher assigning homework to be completed in either Burlington or Aztec. That was critical. That ended up being a very, very important thing in that they know every day that what they've done in class, they can reinforce that with Aztec or Burlington English. You didn't used to be able to do that with Burlington English. Now you can now with the core because they build everything in there. And also we do that in their D2L class, which is their learning management system. So the teacher individually doesn't have to do that. That's there for them. If you're going to go over operations with fractions, here's where you go in Aztec to get that. We talk a lot about time. We've already talked about time today. I try to have teachers say, when you're talking with students, and even when I'm talking with you, it's really not about the time. It's really about progress, completing units, modules, and learning, and that the time will take care of itself. We want students to set up some study time, like an hour a day. And if they get 50 minutes of time on task, outstanding. The emphasis is not just on getting time. The emphasis is on achievement, learning, making academic progress. Teacher enthusiasm is important, and the more closely it's based on the knowledge of students' work is the better it's going to be. We talked about teachers running proxy reports and submitting them to their coordinator. I think that's important in keeping them in the process. Are they making progress towards achieving their goal? How do you know that? Well, first of all, I think you need to know their goals, and they fill out goal sheets at the beginning of the term. I think we need to revisit those. We don't necessarily need to pull the goal sheets, but we can have the students think about it, write some things down, revisit them in a few weeks and see where they are. Perhaps they're unrealistic. They're going to need more time, or they're right on track and they're doing just fine, or they need to adjust what it is they think they want to achieve and what their timeline is for that. Distance learning is self-diagnostic. And I think when students start working in it, it's very rare that I have a student that say, I don't like this. I'd much rather be working out of a workbook. By and large, the vast majority of students in the high 90% say, once I got started and I got things figured out, I love it. It's self-diagnostic. It saves them time. It's efficient for them. And once they can start seeing themselves making progress, that motivates them even more. And especially when they progress so far as to take and pass one of the GED exams, then they're really enthused and energized. And they say, wow, if they take one of the GED tests, then they get, we say 15 minutes, but often it's longer than that, to stand up in front of the class and describe to the class what their experience was. Of course, that begins with, what questions did you remember? And was there a long division question on it? Students see that, hey, that could be me, that should be me, they can do it, I can do it too. And I think they enjoy recounting that, even if they miss it by only a few. That's not failure. That's just they're not quite there yet. They know where the target is and they know where they need to go, what they need to do to get it. With DL, we give a lot more control back to the student. Students can request DL support as well from myself or any of the staff. If they get stuck or they have a technical problem, we do whatever we can do to fix them as quickly as we can. We are one of the programs that do not proactively test students' digital skills for pre-enrollment. Since we enroll everyone, we figure if we have people that don't quite have that skill level, they will show themselves soon enough, and then we can do what we need to do to work on that. When it comes to the actual DL work, it is a rare student that can't negotiate either Burlington English or Aztec with an orientation, and we work them through some things. And they come in on Fridays too for all day tutoring, and we'll help them as well with that. Also, Burlington and Aztec have digital skills training videos built in. And this is something that's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years too, that the Burlington English instructional videos are immense, and they cover just about everything. And Aztec's literacy module, I think, is excellent, and I wish students wouldn't skip it.
I just want to share something with you from the Ideal Distance Education and Blended Learning Handbook. In a blended approach, learners use digital technology to engage in critical thinking and reflection, to be creative and exploratory, and to develop communication and problem-solving strategies. Learners build digital literacy skills, critically analyze information for relevance and trustworthiness, and build self-advocacy skills. Using technology can change power dynamics in learning relationships between learners and educators. As learners and educators co-create the curriculum based on the learner's goals and curiosity, based on the learner's goals, learners start to see themselves as people who can learn and make decisions about their own learning. After being in basic education programs, many adult learners state that they experience a change in how they see themselves. This self-identity shifts after intentionally engaging in learning. A blended learning approach increases the potential for learners to continue to practice using technology and build their literacy and language skills even when they are not in literacy programs. This may increase the chances of learners meeting their goals as they relate to their future employment and future education. Our experience in the field with education programs has taught us that adult learners have time constraints due to work and family responsibilities, and that they require flexibility in their studies. You get the flexibility of online learning with the stability of in-class instruction. The power of these learning formats lies in the ability to personalize education to meet the individual needs of the students. The addition of distance learning stimulates self-confidence and reliance, offers flexibility, allows for the personalization of education, ownership of learning by the student, and builds digital skill and digital readiness.
So now that we've convinced you how important it is to put distance learning into your curriculum and into your processes, I wanted to share with you a few minutes of two pieces of software that we've purchased a state license for. All of you should be aware of this. I'm hoping that you're aware of it. If not, you need to talk to your DL lead, who should share that information with you. We mentioned before, we've purchased a statewide license for your students to North Star Digital Literacy Assessment. This program not only offers these assessments that your students can take, there's a way that you can proctor them so they can get a certificate that you can print out and a digital badge that they can put on their resume. It also has some prescriptive learning modules that allows your students to learn the modules first, whether it's Microsoft Office suite or it's internet use, internet in a daily life, things like that. So you're going to have some students who are really bought into the concept of distance learning, but if they don't have the proper digital literacy skills, these are those backup plans, those resources that I talked about earlier. North Star Digital Literacy is one that I would start with your very, very basic students to help them get on board. It talks about the keyboarding and the mouse and so forth. Then we've also partnered with Essential Education only for their Computer Essentials software. We have a state license for your students for Computer Essentials offered by Essential Ed. So I wanted to mention to you, everyone on, it's a free service. If you have students who meet certain criteria, if they have a child at home that's getting a free lunch, whatever the characteristics are, they can get access to the internet for as low as $10 a month or something. By helping students get these resources, they're going to be better equipped to get their skills enhanced so they can complete that distance learning curriculum and get those MSGs. They can get a laptop through Everyone On for like $100. They can get a desktop for about $80. They can get the monitor and the desktop and everything for about $155.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCall continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.